Hello everyone. So this is a session which is going to be about why we have to choose psychology as an optional. We are going to dive deeper into various aspects related to this particular subject, psychology as an optional subject. While you have multiple subjects, a lot many subjects, more than 45 subjects you have to choose from. Why should we choose this? Of course, the first and the foremost consideration we are going to have about any optional is that whether you have interest in the subject or not. Further, you have to see the scoring potential of that subject. One thing I would like to say about this particular optional is that whatever you write will be right if your understanding is right. So whatever you write in this paper will be considered as right if your understanding is very clear, as in if it is right. So this is the fundamental thing for this particular optional, that is psychology. Many subjects that we see, many optionals that we see have a lot of dynamic content. This subject also has some element of dynamism. At the same time, you have a lot of static content. Research happens quite a lot. People are interested in psychology. People are interested in how humans behave, how we think, how we feel. So for this reason, a lot of research happens day in, day out. A lot of findings are coming through. And our understanding of human brains only contributes much more to this understanding. Taking all of this into consideration, this is a very fascinating subject. That's for sure. Very interesting subject. You have a total of 28 chapters, both the papers put together. As we might be already knowing, you might be already knowing that paper 1 and paper 2, you have 14 chapters each. The first part, that is the paper 1, is related to your theory, and the second paper is completely application oriented. So I'll tell you why you should be choosing this optional. Then I'll tell you the pitfalls of this optional as well. The number of candidates that used to choose psychology as an optional was a lot many. When we had two optionals, so UPSC needed candidates to choose two optionals. Each optional would have two papers. But this was discontinued since 2013-14. It has been discontinued. So you have only one optional now. So since then, the number of candidates choosing psychology has dropped significantly. So psychology as an optional, the number of candidates choosing this as an optional has dropped significantly to the tune of, if you look at the numbers as to how many people are choosing psychology as an optional in your main examination, it is hardly 200 candidates write with this as an optional. Earlier, this number used to be somewhere around 800, 900. Even it used to cross 1000 sometimes. As of now, it's just around 200. Even 200 is a stretch. Why is such less number of people are taking psychology as an optional? It's because, the difficulty of the paper in 1 year. There was one particular year, which is 2012. In that particular year, the paper had turned out to be very, very difficult. It was a nightmare. After that, the paper has become simpler. So the number of students, the competition is lesser. This is one way of looking at it. The competition is much, much lesser in this subject. Compare it to other optionals like anthropology or sociology or even your political science and international relations, even public administration. The number of candidates is more than 2000 almost. 1800 to 2000 plus candidates would be there. The competition is on the higher side. So there are some advantages of psychology as an optional. There are some disadvantages. So we will focus on the advantages first. Then we will look at some of the disadvantages of psychology as an optional. Who should be taking, which means when you look at the advantages and if you are able to tick some of the boxes, you should be ready to take it as an optional. Background, absolutely not required. And I'll also look at the cons of this optional. What can be the drawbacks of this as an optional? And finally, we'll look at the syllabus in brief and the approach we are going to take to cover this particular subject. I'll also give you a ballpark figure as to how many number of hours you need to spend on this optional. So whether it is a huge optional or whether it is a smaller optional compared to other optionals. So these are the things which we are going to discuss in brief. So the advantages part. The first and the foremost advantage of psychology as an optional is the number of sources that you need to refer to is very, very limited. To just give you an idea, once you have attended the classes and you have made class notes, so class notes you have made, plus of course you have to go through the NCERTs. So NCERTs, you have two books, two NCERTs of class 11 and class 12. After this, you have one standard book to refer to, which is Introduction to Psychology by Barron or Cicerelli. So either you can refer Barron or Cicerelli. Apart from this, there are some books which are very, very particular to social psychology. There are books particular to personality development, right? For personality, you have a separate book by Lindsay. And then you have a separate book for social psychology, again by Barron and Grishwar Mishra. And then you have a cognitive psychology book. These books are not required. While you can keep them for reference, they are not required per se. Apart from this, you have to refer to for entire paper 2. Of course, with the class notes, if you supplement it with Smarak Swain, that is sufficient. These are the only books that we require for the preparation. So when I say class notes, when I teach, you will be making the class notes. Along with that, there is some dynamic digital. I call it as dynamic digital, which is whatever you have learned in the class, that will be in the digital notes. At the same time, there will be updates based on the current affairs, current things that are happening in the field of psychology. So that's called the dynamic digital. Will give you the access to it. So you'll be able to track chapter by chapter, the updates. So this is related to the sources. Only these many sources are required. And if you look at the content as to how much of it is static, how much of it is going to be dynamic, I would say 85% of whatever we learn is static. 15% is dynamic. It's not even current affairs, I would say. It is more about you adding in the value. So value addition comes from what? The recent research, recent studies that have happened. So that is value addition part. That's not even current affairs, I would say. Okay. So in passing references, you can add the current affairs here and there. So overall, 85% of your content that you're going to write, that you're going to prepare for this particular optional is going to be static. Another 15% is going to be, I would say, current or dynamic. Further, whether this is a boring optional, of all the 28 chapters we are going to look at, I would say I can give an assurance that 25 chapters are really, really interesting. Rest 3 chapters are a bit boring, or rather than boring, I would say they are mostly research methods based. They are research methods, research methodology. There are no calculations as such, but it's more like you have to learn about a particular way of research, the steps in research. There's not a lot to think about in these 3 chapters, whatever 3 chapters are remaining. So those 3 chapters are a bit boring. Apart from that, the rest 25 are very, very interesting. They become interesting for a reason. The reason is it's about human behavior, human thinking, our feelings, right? Our attitudes, our belief systems, okay? How our brain works, or cognition basically. How we learn things, how we remember things, how we forget things, why do we forget things. So the rest 25 chapters are about these things itself, because of which it is mostly regarding us, regarding our daily lives, regarding our interactions with other people, regarding our emotions. It is very, very interesting, the 25 chapters. The 3 chapters, yes, they are a bit boring. Furthermore, so this is the next advantage. Another advantage, it is going to greatly contribute to your personality development as well. Because we are going to learn about why we behave in certain situations in certain manners, the biases that work. So we look at certain things in a particular manner. So we have some stereotypes, we have some prejudices, we like certain things, we do not like certain things. Why do we do these things? Why do we dislike certain things? How our memories are shaped? Why do we forget? All these things. The advantage is that we apply all these things in our life and we gauge ourselves as to what we are. We understand ourselves better. Once we start understanding ourselves better, it will eventually contribute to personality development. So that's going to come in handy in your interviews. You'll get to know what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are. You'll be able to assess yourself as to where you stand, what changes you need to make so as to strengthen yourself and overcome the weaknesses that you have. So this is something where psychology as an optional is going to be helpful. When you look at the questions also, if we look at the previous year questions, what we observe is almost 90% of the questions are coming from the standard areas. As in, you see there is a kind of repetition. So there's a kind of repetition that is happening. If you go through the last 10, 12 years question papers, you see almost 90% of the questions are getting repeated. Rather than questions getting repeated, I would say the topics on which the questions are being asked, they are repetitive. So there are certain areas where the questions are asked and you get the questions from those areas itself again and again. Because of which I would say this is like a treasure for you. It's a treasure. If we are able to come up with answers for these previous year questions, get them evaluated, I think your answer writing preparation is done. So what you need to do is, after the classes are done for a particular chapter, you are supposed to write the answers for the PYQs related to that chapter, get them evaluated by me. So if you are doing this on a regular basis, your answer writing would be far more superior than most of the candidates from other optionals, or for that matter from psychology as an optional itself, whosoever follows this, your answer writing skills will be much, much better. The scoring part, whether this optional is scoring or not, as I told you, scoring is completely dependent on your understanding. This is the next advantage. Less to remember. There is less to remember, more to understand. Less to remember, more to understand. This is an advantage, at the same time it is a disadvantage. What is the advantage? You need not remember much, you just have to understand. And what is the disadvantage? Because it is surely based on understanding, you have to understand it, you have to understand it in the right manner. Only when you understand in the right manner will you be able to put it across on paper so that the other person understands in the same perspective as you have written. What I am trying to say is that this subject is a bit subjective in nature. Subjective to understanding. It is subject to understanding of the person who is reading it. For this reason, you have to be a bit careful while understanding. Whether you are understanding it correctly or not holds the key. Clear? And even while solving the questions, the main thing is whether you are able to understand the question. Only when you understand the question will you be able to understand the demand of the question, and accordingly you will be able to articulate an answer. So if your understanding is wrong, the answer you have written, though you might feel very happy about the answer you have written, that might not serve the purpose. Right? The next advantage is, while the number of people who choose this as an optional is less, the success rate tells a different story. The success rate has been consistently in the range of 7 to 9%. Consistently. So even in the dark year, which is 2012, where the paper was very, very tough, even in that year, it was more than 7%, the success rate. This you can't say about many other optionals. So 7 to 9% success rate is guaranteed. And then there is a lot of elbow room for you to innovate. Where? Innovate in answers. Lot of elbow room. It's not that whatever is in the textbook you have to write the same thing. Your answers will be based on your understanding. A lot of creativity can be brought to the fore. So you have to be creative writers. So if you are able to write the answers in a very creative manner, yes, this subject is for you. So it's not going to be dependent on what is there in the book. It's going to be dependent on what you have understood and whether you have understood it rightly or not. And the final reason or final advantage is that it's going to be really, really helpful in two other areas, significant areas. In fact, those two areas are: one is your ethics paper, and two, it's the essay. In the ethics paper, you have chapter 2, which is related to emotional intelligence, which is completely related to psychology. Attitudes chapter is completely related to psychology. Aptitude is related to psychology. And further, the last part of the first chapter, which is about inculcation of values. All these parts, so 3 entire chapters I would say almost, and a small part of chapter 1. So you have a total of 7 chapters plus 1 chapter related to case study. Out of 7 chapters, almost 3 chapters or 3.5 chapters are related to your psychology itself. This is one understanding you can take away from this. So ethics theory part, half of the theory part, or let's say even somewhere around 40% of the theory part is related to psychology. The second thing is essay. Essay has 2 parts. Essay 1 is usually socio-economic and political issues. This is the basis for one essay. The second essay is generally philosophical essay. Because psychology has its roots in philosophy, it is a very close relative of philosophy. It's easier to write the answers when you have philosophy or psychology as an optional, especially this particular essay, which is about 125 marks. Some years, you may be lucky if you choose psychology or philosophy as an optional. Students who choose these as optionals, they might get lucky, where the first essay also turns out to be a philosophical one. Then the contribution would be 125 plus 125. The entire paper is based on your optional itself. That's how it would look. So we'll not go into that area. Let's have, let's have the understanding that only one essay is coming from one essay is coming from philosophical part. The other essay is going to be socio-economic politico, and 3 chapters from what? Ethics, or related to psychology. By this measure, 500 marks psychology optional, 125 marks from your essay paper conservatively, and then you have at least out of 125 marks for 7 chapters and 125 marks for this 1 chapter, which is case study. Out of 125 marks, it would be safe to say at least 50 to 60 marks will be coming from psychology related aspects. This much is guaranteed. Because of psychology as an optional, your preparation will be done for these many number of marks. So which is around 625 plus 50, 675. So 675 marks out of 1750 marks. Contribution by your optional subject, that is psychology. So these are the advantages. Now what are the disadvantages of this optional? The cons of this optional. So who should be wary of it? And whether, if you have a background, is it better to choose this as an optional? I would say there is no requirement of a background as such. So no background requirement whatsoever. What is required is interest. How to know whether you have interest in this subject or not? All you have to do is just go through a random chapter. Take up a random chapter in class 11, class 12 psychology NCERT textbook. A random chapter. Do not read the first chapter. Go to a random chapter somewhere in between. If you find it is really engaging, you can choose this as an optional. Do not think too much. If you have doubts, instead of going through 1 chapter, go through 2 chapters. I think that is sufficient for you to choose this as an optional. So you need not break your head over whether you have a background or not. Just do this simple exercise. If you find it interesting, stick to it. If you're not finding it interesting, try the other optional, same thing. Whosoever engages in this exercise, let's say for example you have psychology on cards, you have another subject, let's say political science on cards, you have anthropology on cards. whosoever engages in this exercise as to find where their interest lies, I would say almost 40% of the candidates choose psychology as an optional. Why? Because they find it interesting because it is about human behavior, human thought processes, right? Our feelings. Fine. What if I have a background already in psychology? Is it good? It is good. It is going to contribute to an extent. Why? Because you would be knowing the jargons already. You will be knowing some of the words already. So it's going to be a bit more easier for you to deal with it. Any optional, for that matter, will have its own jargons. So in psychology, the jargons are a bit more. So if you talk about the cons of this optional or the disadvantages of this optional, the first and the foremost is the jargons. So there are a bit more jargons compared to other optionals. So they are a bit standard jargons. So the words, the special words of this optional subject are a bit more complex, I would say. Not biological per se, it's just the English wordings are a bit more complex, I would say. Second is related to the complexity of the concepts. Some of the concepts are complex, because of which, why it becomes complex is because of the subjectivity, because of the subjective nature of the concepts. One person understands in one manner, the other person may understand the same concept communicated in the same manner in a different light altogether. So that becomes an issue, complexity of the concepts. Thirdly, understanding the questions. Understanding the questions is an issue. Until and unless you have done some 3 to 4 revisions, understanding the questions become a bit difficult. This is another con. So apart from this cons, I am not able to think of many. Furthermore, I can speak of, let's say, the time that you need to allocate for this optional is something which you need to take into consideration. It's not like you can sit at once and study a lot of this optional. So it has to be spaced. Unlike other optionals where you can sit and study for hours together, this optional requires some spacing. You need to give some breaks. Why? Because whenever you study this optional, because it is related to you, we tend to draw comparisons. In the back of your head, you will start thinking about, okay, this has happened in my life too. Now, when you make connections like this, your cognitive energy, your mental energy gets drained more. More drainage of what? Your mental energy. That is why you need to take more breaks. On the other hand, you just think about other options. Let's say if you are talking about history as an optional or political science as an optional. Whatever is happening here, it is not related to you per se. That is why you need not think about what has happened in your life. Here, at every instance, you might start thinking, okay, this has happened in my life. This has happened in my friend's life. So what happens? Because you are making connections on a regular basis, it is something which drains a bit of your mental energy. That is why spaced learning. But you will be able to understand better. That is that. Okay. So this is about the cons. So this I would not see as a con, but yeah, you can't study at a stretch. The next thing is when we look at the syllabus, there are 2 papers, as I told you. Paper 1, paper 2. Paper 1 has 14 chapters. and paper 2 has 14 chapters, a total of 28 chapters. The paper 1 is mostly about theories and concepts. Theories and concepts. It is only about understanding these. You have to build the understanding of all these theories and concepts. That is the most crucial part. In fact, most of the answers can be written if you memorize the syllabus properly. If you memorize the syllabus properly, your answers can be very well diversified. Connections can be made better. So, real life examples come in real handy. Real life examples are very, very handy in this part of the paper. Enhances your understanding to a great deal. Current affairs, very minimal, because it is mostly related to theories and concepts. Not much of current affairs or dynamic content we can bring in here. Whereas in paper 2, the paper 2 is application based. I told you about 3 chapters being boring. 2 of those chapters are here. 2 chapters which are not so interesting. So, not interesting. One of the chapters is here in paper 2. One chapter not interesting. So, all the 14 chapters are mostly application based. Whatever we have learned here, we are going to apply in paper 2. So, it's not like we have chapter 1 applied in chapter 1 of paper 2. No, it's not like that. It is different kind of application where you have to have the idea of at least 2 to 3 chapters to apply it to one chapter here. Okay, 2 to 3 chapters of paper 1 applied to one chapter of paper 2. That's how it is. As I told you, for this you need only one book along with the class notes. Here you would require 2 NCERT books plus 1 standard book plus class notes. So this is about paper 2 and paper 1. In paper 2, if you just make the index properly, of the entire syllabus and the subheadings and the subtopics, I think that is sufficient for you for paper 2 in order to write answers. Wonderful answers you can write, even if you are able to make this part, index part. Okay. Why it is like that? Because you would be already knowing the concepts from here. Here you have to just remember the index properly. Index, the connections you have to remember. Okay. Next. What we do in the class, do we approach paper 1 and then go to paper 2, or how is it we do it? We are going to take a slightly different approach. What we are going to do is, in the class, we are going to go section wise. It's not going to be chapter wise, we are going to go section wise. When I say section wise, it means there will be 2 to 3 chapters which are related to what is there in paper 2. So in paper 1, if I am talking about learning is a chapter, and then you have memory is a chapter, sensation, attention, perception is a chapter, and also intelligence. Related to these 4, we have a chapter in paper 2, educational psychology. So it's the application of these ideas we have this particular chapter in paper 2. So what we do is we learn all of these together. So first we cover these four, then we learn education psychology along with that. So that's one section. So this is what we do. So instead of studying entire paper 1 first and then going to paper 2, what we do is related chapters we will study together. So all these chapters are related to cognitive psychology. Okay. So section wise we are going to proceed. Second thing is that we are going to have some videos played in the class related to some of the research that has happened, the experiments that have happened. So we are going to use images to enhance your understanding in the classes. No use of PPT. So it's mostly going to be the videos and images at times. We'll give you the material in the form of dynamic digital. If the need be, you can take a printout of it. And we will provide one copy of your notes. So the printed material will be provided, and further additions you can find it in dynamic digital. And PYQs, previous year questions based on syllabus or chapters, chapter based PYQs that will be provided to you. Test series would be there. You will have a test series as a part of this course itself. So you are going to have 6 tests related to paper 1 and 6 tests related to paper 2. Okay. Apart from this, whatever answers you write, answers evaluation would be done. That is your answer writing practice. So in the class itself, how to write answers will also be discussed. A framework will be given to certain questions. You are going to follow that. Okay, model answer kind of thing will be given to you in the classes itself. So even as we complete a particular chapter, we'll be discussing how to write an answer to some of the questions. On the basis of that, you're going to write the answers and get them evaluated so that you can develop the skill of answer writing over a period of time. Now, coming to the sections, how we have divided so that you get a glimpse of what are all the chapters as well. The section 1, I'll just mention the chapters, what is there in section 1. The introduction chapter. Introduction chapter. This belongs to paper 1. Paper 1, introduction chapter. The second chapter which we are going to cover in section 1 is related to this development of human behavior, which is developmental psychology, development of human behavior. This is again paper 1 related. What we have in this chapter, so in the introduction chapter, we are going to look at the historical antecedents, as in, where did psychology come from, and what are the roots of psychology, and what are the researches or broad schools of psychology, what psychology studies, what does it not study, all these things, the method that psychology uses to learn about human behavior, human thought processes. So that is what we learn in introduction chapter. In the development of human behavior chapter, it is lifespan development. The most important aspect is lifespan development, as in at each stage of our life, as infants, as children, as adolescents, as adults, what are all the changes that happen in our body, that is physical changes? What are all the changes that happen cognitively, that is our mental, mental processes, how do they change? Emotionally, how do we change? as well as how do we change in the way we look at what is right and wrong, that is moral development. So overall, how changes happen as we move from one stage of life to another. So that is something that we see in the development of human behavior chapter. And also a fascinating discussion we are going to have in this particular chapter is that to what extent does our environment decide what we are? To what extent do the genes decide what we are? It's called the nature-nurture debate. A wonderful discussion we have here. Further, there is also a topic called developmental tasks in this paper, in this particular chapter. That is, at each stage of development, there are certain tasks that we need to complete. At least the society expects us to complete those tasks. Only then we say the development has happened properly in that particular stage. So this is related to development of human behavior. The third chapter in this section is going to be the personality chapter. The personality chapter. So what is human personality? What is self? And there are different theorists, different schools of psychology who have given different ideas about what personality is, how personality development happens overall. This is a lengthy chapter. Even this one is a lengthy chapter. These two are lengthy chapters, but very, very fascinating details you are going to learn about. This is section 1. If we want, we can also add one more chapter here, which is related to paper 2. This is also paper 1. So we can add certain chapters here, so which are related to abnormal psychology. But I would not add it here. Why? Because it's going to be too hefty a section if we add that chapter here. So I will retain that, I will hold on to that particular chapter which is related to abnormal psychology, which is about the personality disorders or the mood related disorders, okay, anxiety related disorders. So those things we are going to discuss in a separate chapter. That would be separate section. That would be better. The unit 2 is related to cognitive psychology. Unit 2 or section 2 is related to cognitive psychology. This is again a very fascinating area. A lot of chapters come into this particular section. In this, the first one is sensation, attention, perception chapter, SAP. Sensation, attention and perception. Second, we are going to learn about learning as a chapter. How do we learn? Third, we are going to have memory as a chapter. And then we have thinking and problem solving. Thinking and problem solving. 5, we have intelligence and aptitude. Intelligence and aptitude. You have emotional intelligence as a part of it and aptitude, as I told you. Then you have language and communication in this section. Language and communication. And finally, you have education psychology. So when you look at this section, all these chapters are related to paper 1. Paper 1, paper 1, paper 1, paper 1, and this one is paper 2. This is paper 2. So the application of all these ideas is in education psychology. So this is here section 2, a lengthy section, a lot to learn here. And the next section is the motivation related section, section 3. See, this is a section where we will be learning about memory, which means we have to learn about forgetting. Learning, how do we learn something? How do we unlearn something? After learning, when do we say learning has happened? Only if we are able to remember what, whatever we have acquired, whatever information we have acquired, only if we are able to remember it, then only learning has happened. Otherwise, it is useless. Otherwise, we don't say it is learning also. And thinking and problem solving, how do we solve the problems? What are the techniques that we use to solve the problems, right? And then intelligence, IQ. So what are the ways in which we measure IQ? What is intelligence in the first place, right? What are the theories related to intelligence? Language and communication. How do we learn language? What are the features of language? Okay, can we learn any number of languages? So such are the questions that are addressed in this section. Section 3 is related to motivation and emotion. The first chapter in this section is, of course, motivation and emotion. Motivation and emotions. And the next chapter, this is again paper 1. Related to this chapter, there are multiple chapters in paper 2. Work and organizational psychology is one, which is the application of this particular chapter. So paper 2 it is. Further, we have psychology and economic development. So economic development chapter is also related to motivation. Actually, it is related to motivation. So we delve into questions like why some of the countries are developed, why some of the countries are underdeveloped, what is the motivation behind it. So economic development linked to motivation, right? And then application of psychology to other fields. Application of psychology to other fields. Here also we have motivation and emotion coming into picture. So here we have gender psychology, so military psychology, okay, sports psychology. So it is the application of what we learn in that particular chapter, that is section 3. Further, you have section 4. Section 4 in section 4 it is about attitudes, values and interests. This is a social psychology wing. This is related to social psychology, our interactions with people. So this is more about how we interact with people. So far it was more on an individual level. Now it becomes how we interact with people and what goes on in our minds while we interact with people. And here you have, this is again paper 1. So the paper 2 part related to this particular chapter, or your community psychology. Community psychology is one. And then application of psychology to disadvantaged groups. Disadvantaged groups. What goes on in the minds of the disadvantaged groups? Poor people, what goes on in their mind? Rich people, what goes on in their mind? Community psychology, why some people are ready to help within a community, why some people are not ready to help within a community. Okay, so community action, whenever you have smaller groups, they engage in certain actions and contribute to the well-being of the community. Whenever it is a large group, they do not do it. Why does it happen? So such aspects are dealt with. So then you have social integration. Social integration related. Psychology of social integration. So these are the application parts. All these are paper 2 related. Paper 2, paper 2 and paper 2. This is section 4. And then we have the section 5. Section 5 is related to, I would say, abnormal psychology. Section 5 is abnormal psychology related. So in abnormal psychology, the first one is psychological disorders, psychological well-being and disorders. What are the different types of psychological disorders we have come across? Maybe, people walk at night, even as they sleep. That's a disorder. Personality disorders, psychopathy, right? Antisocial elements. And then you have anxiety, mood swings, or so as to speak, depression, schizophrenia. So what are all these disorders? So what are the symptoms? When do we say a person has this disorder? So this is something which we will go into in this particular chapter. Again, this is related to paper 2. The entire section 5 is related to paper 2, in fact. The second one is therapeutic approaches. So what approach are we going to take in order to solve the problems, as in disorders? How to deal with the disorders? What are the approaches we have? Therapeutic approaches. And thirdly, see, once a person is having a disorder, or for that matter does something wrong, or has some or the other issue in life which is considered to be abnormal, maybe the person does a crime, goes to the jail, we call it as a correction facility. Once goes to the correction facility, the person has changed now. Now the person has to come back to the society again. A person has a disorder, therapy is done, now has to come back to the society. Rehabilitation is required. We have rehabilitation psychology. For whom? For all types of people who are considered to be abnormal at one point. How to reintegrate them into the society again. How to reintroduce them into the society again. That is rehabilitation psychology. And then you have unit number 6, or the section 6. Section 6. These are more like miscellaneous chapter, or the contemporary chapters, we can say. Issues and perspectives. Issues and perspectives in modern contemporary psychology. This is paper 1, last chapter. This is chapter number 14 in paper 1. And secondly, application of psychology to IT and mass media. IT and mass media. This is paper 2. And finally, the last chapter for section 6 is application of psychology to environment and related fields. Environment and related fields. So this is more like a miscellaneous section, we can say, miscellaneous and contemporary section. These chapters we are going to learn together. This is your section 6. And finally, you have section 7. Section 7 is going to be the one which is going to have those chapters which I told you as boring in both paper 1 and paper 2. So this chapter, this section will have 3 chapters: methods of psychology, second, research methods, and thirdly, Psychological measurement of individual differences. Psychological measurement of individual differences. These are the chapters. A total of 28. You have 3 plus 3, 6, and probably we have it here. 3 plus 3, 6 plus 3, 9, 9 plus 4, 13, 13, 13 plus 4, 17, 17 plus 7 would be 24, 24, yeah, 28 chapters. Why? Because there is going to be a gender psychology. There is gender psychology as well. So that is in other fields. So there is one other fields. Within that there would be gender psychology. So a total of 28 chapters. All right. So this is about how we deal with psychology as an optional. As I told you, very less number of books to refer to, more focus on classes and answer writing. So if you are sticking to these basic things, psychology as an optional is wonderful. Any queries you have, you can just meet me or give a call, and we'll be available to answer your doubts related to this optional. And right now the admissions are open, so we will be starting our classes from August 26th. All right, thank you.